Just as sure as it takes two eyes to make a pair. Brother, we can't quit until we get our share. Say it loud. Say it loud.
Hello, 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 folks. It's Monday night. Time for another episode of Say It Loud. I'd like to announce now, especially if I have any of my students listening or who are listening in the archives, you can find a new program. And I was not aware that it was on, but it sounded really, really interesting as I sort of approached towards its end. A new program, The F Word, which is going to be on Monday nights at 9 to 10, and that is your classmate, Molly Connell. So if people are interested in hearing your classmate, please check that show out. Like I said, it sounded really, really good. The F Word is feminism, I believe. I'm going to guess. And yeah, it sounded really good. Tonight, I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to read my disclaimer really quickly here. Welcome to Say It Loud. My name is John Terry. I'm the producer of the show. The things that you will hear over the next 50 minutes represent the views of Say It Loud and the people making them. All opinions and quotations in no way represent River West Radio and are the sole responsibility of the producer, guests, and callers. River West Radio is not liable for any legal issues arising from the content of this program. And now I am continuing the tradition that I have sort of started over the last few weeks, doing radio programs that fit the material of my course. So now we have had our, I'm getting my mic adjusted here. I'm always starting a little bit late. I've had an LGBTQ week last week, and we went through punk about 3 different times, and now I'm going to go through early hip-hop into hip-hop, I guess, from about the 1980s up to the 2000s, and then I'm planning on hopefully having a guest on for our 3rd installment, and so we can talk about local Milwaukee hip-hop, and we can talk about ethnicity and social justice in hip-hop. But tonight I'm going to do a background on hip-hop, and now as far as I'm going to tell you, folks, I'm getting a little bit sick. People saw me in class, so I'm not the type to get sick too often. Doing a regimen of medication and beer, so I don't know if that's really going to work out too well. But I'm a little bit out of it. Taking some cough medicine and stuff like that. Don't usually do that, so forgive me if I'm more prone to just let the music do the talking tonight. But there is one point that I kind of want to make, and I do. This is something that I think is very interesting to me, but hard to talk about in class, and so I'm not going to necessarily go through this too much in class specifically, but I think it's really important, is that I do believe that there is what I would call a continuum of black music. W.E.B. Du Bois calls it the soul of black folks, I guess you could say, and I do believe that that is a phenomenon. I think that that is something that is real, but I also think that it's not necessarily the job of everybody who's studying music or African American culture or whatever to really comment on it. And I am white myself, and so I don't think it's necessarily my job to comment on that or anything, but I do believe that there is something to that, and I do believe that there is this sort of continuum, and I think that there are certain types of music that will speak more maybe to this kind of soul, I guess if you could say it. Almost impossible to study. It's something that's interesting to think about and talk about. The things that you can study are who made the money, what does racism do when it comes to production, selecting artists to record, shaping the kinds of music that are recorded, etc., etc., etc. So I am of the impression that there are certain things that are valuable to study that you can think about, but I do believe that there is something to the notion that there is a continuum of black music, and I'm going to start with the blues and take us all the way up to hip hop. And I would think that a lot of people would not probably start here thinking about hip hop. A lot of people would probably go to the late 1960s, early soul and things like that, but I don't think that you can make it to early hip hop without starting here, and really it's about finding this kind of vocal style and delivery. So we're going to talk about that stuff tonight, but I'm going to play a song here now, and this is some of these early blues recordings were really taken out of African American vernacular culture. What I mean by that is like sort of ways of speaking, ways of talking about certain things, styles of talking about certain things. And so I really think that you can find what I would call the basis for hip hop in the blues, and it takes this vocal style a while to come around to the kind of music that ends up providing the backbeats and the break beats in the background for hip hop. But I'll talk about that as we go. So I'm going to play a song by Frankie Half Pint Jackson, and this is a song from probably around 1929. It's not necessarily clear, and it's Jive Man Blues. And I think there's a couple things. One, the style, the vocal delivery, sort of talking over music, and then the actual content of the song. So there's a couple like this. And then we're going to get into some jazz-oetry. We're going to get into some soul, some go-go, some stuff like that, some funk. So here's Jive Man Blues, Frankie Half Pint Jackson, and I'm going to say from 1929, even though that might not be quite true, and I would call it the first, maybe the first song, the greatest, the great ancestor of hip hop. Here we go.
All right, look out, brother. Don't try to get slack. I'll have to get something from you, and I won't give it back. Folks, that was a jiving man from the west. Everybody called him Jiving Depressed. He jived his maw, he jived his paw, he even down jived his maw-in-law. He jived every soul, he jived a mule named Maud. He was so game, he jived the Cadillac squad. Had a habit of jiving, and that ain't all with his Lord, 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 Lord. Oh, jiving now. Oh, you salty dog. Hang loud, 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 loud. He jived so much, he was a mystery. He even jived the gang that wrote policy. He jived the whole creation, seemed like a star with his Lord, 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 Lord. He even jived the gal that called Pretty Bright Eyes. He buncoed her so, you know the poor kid cried. He said, I'm a jiver from my birth. He jived so much he died and left this earth with his Lord, 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 Lord. Hey! Oh, you pretty thing. What you want me to buy?
So there is Frankie Jackson, and you can sort of see what I'm getting at with this kind of delivery. And I think that the terminology and other things sort of speak to this kind of this continuum that I'm going to try and argue that there is. I'm going to give you another example of something sort of just like that. And this is from, I mean, I would call her the original badass, one of my favorite performers of all time. One, Ms. Memphis Minnie, tougher than a lot of the boys she rolled with, gambling, shooting, drinking, her own, very much her own woman at a time when it was almost impossible for women to cut their own records and produce their own songs and write them. She did all of those things. Here's a song from 1930, Frankie Jean, and again, just trying to make an argument for this kind of style, this speaking delivery over music that sort of morphs, but is kind of obviously the roots of what becomes hip-hop later on. So here's Frankie Jean from Memphis Minnie, 1930.
One time my papa had a horse. His name was Frank Jean. Man, that's the runnest horse the world ever seen. And it just do me good to ride old Frank Jean. And do you good to sit and listen to him sometime when he coming down that tight road, almost making his feet talk. Man, that's the strangest good horse the world ever seen. Some kind of like this. Go on, Frank Jean, go on. Got loose. I couldn't catch him to save my life. I called Frank G. my corner. He didn't seem to pay me no mind. I've been told my
Empire's Memphis Mini. And if you listen to those opening blues, I think in the background you can kind of hear the roots of one Jimi Hendrix myself, and I'll make that argument several times. But you get the idea again that there is, people going into the recording studio and doing this kind of delivery, and you will find this in some of the, well, we guess call them country for lack of a better word at the time, songs as well. But this is something that really comes out of the blues and is sort of important to that style. And you find some of the antecedents of hip-hop are this sort of like talking over the breaks that becomes really, really prominent in soul, which really directly leads to hip-hop. But you can find this, so that's 1930, so we're talking 82 years ago, 83 years ago, something that I think is pretty clearly a root of hip-hop. Now here's another song. So a lot of these have this kind of this style, but there's another song that I think really directly speaks to hip-hop, because, and this is something that we're going to talk about right now. We're talking about games in class. I think this is related, but when we talk about hip-hop, one of the things that always comes up, and it should come up, is the game The Dozens. And so this is basically this kind of, and people are sort of unclear necessarily exactly where this comes from. There's some theories, and we'll talk about that in class. But the idea of The Dozens is this usually a game that, and it was a lot of times young black men, but actually everybody kind of got to get involved. And what you would do is you would basically like insult your friends. And really the thing about The Dozens was, and this is interesting how sort of the violence makes its way into some hip hop too, which is, it's actually not really appropriate to like label all hip hop as violent. Plenty of it is anti-violent. But one of the things that was sort of like the key to The Dozens is that you would make these jokes and you would go back and forth, and really it's the person who lost their cool, the person who couldn't take receiving the joke, was kind of the loser of the game, actually. So it's sort of about like not getting violent over the insults, but it was about kind of keeping your cool. But here's the song, and this comes back. So here's the song, and this is actually one of many at the time. This happens to a lot of these old blues songs. There are so many versions going around, and by the time somebody actually puts it on tape, it's probably a song that's been floating around for years and years. So this is from 1935, so I would say it's fair to say that there were versions of this song around at least for 5 to 10 years before that. Who knows? And this is really, some people sort of say that this is a game that kind of came out of slave days. So it's The 12s is Kokomo Arnold's song, The Dirty Dozens. There's a few other people who have made very similar songs at the same time, but this is my favorite version. So here's The Dirty Dozens, and you listen to it, and this is very much becomes a part of hip-hop style. So what is it about? It's passing these insults around. So here's The Dirty Dozens, The 12s, Kokomo Arnold's version from 1935.
So I want everybody fall in line. Shake your shimmy like I'm shaking mine. You shake your shimmy, shake it fast. If you can't shake your shimmy, shake it yes, yes, yes. Cause she's a dirty mistreater, robber and cheater. Slip you in the desert, pop it in your cousin, let your mama do the Lord alone. Young or your mama, out across the field, slipping in the slide, and it's like an automobile. I hollered at your mama, I told her to wait. She slipped away from me just like a cat like eight, cause she's a running mistreater, robber and cheater. Slip it in the desert, hop it in your cousin, let your mama do the Lord alone. I like your mama, sister too. I did like your papa, but your papa wouldn't do. I met your papa on a corner the other day. I soon found out that he was funny that way, cause he's a dirty mistreater, robber and a cheater. Slipped it in the desert, papa in your cousin, let your mama do the Lord alone.
Alright, so there we actually hear something that's a little bit familiar to the things that, other things that we're talking about in class. Is there's the insult, saw your dad on the corner, he's funny that way. It's actually sort of alluding to his father's homosexuality. But there's the basically taking the game and putting it on record there as the Dirty Dozens, and so it's just sort of this game to pass around these insults, but it's something that gets incorporated very much into the style of hip-hop, and so there's an extremely, you can't think of a rock and roll song. I guess there are a couple of examples. There's the sort of Southern Man versus Lynyrd Skynyrd, I guess, but it's very tough to think of a rock and roll song that specifically calls somebody else out, right? There might be some about bragging, I guess, or trying to think of other genres where the actual singer, the goal of the song is to call somebody out, especially to call somebody out specifically or by name, which happens many, many times in hip-hop. So it becomes kind of a part of the style, and so that's why I include that song. I'm going to jump forward quite a bit here, and we're going to get into the 60s. Early 1962 or 1961, Oscar Brown Jr., people probably could be familiar with him as a great political activist and musician. And the reason I'm taking this 25-year jump, I guess, is to get to something that is a much different style, but we're talking about a vocal style, and it's also about this continuum. And there's a couple songs that I want to keep on emphasizing that with, that there's this continuum of black music where it is the issues, these certain kind of issues come up over and over and over again, and they're expressed in a certain and particular way. They use them through song and through humor, and so many of these things become really essential elements of hip-hop. And I think that, it's like sort of foolish to say, of course there are definite white influences. I mean, a lot of hip-hop guys are listening to disco music and they incorporate those into the breaks. But it'd be sort of foolish to say that this is not something that, at least at its outset, was a form of black music, not unlike the blues. And same with the blues. There's a lot of sort of cooperation / competition between white and black performers. But here is a song, I guess it's more like a speech, I guess you could say. And we're going to do a couple of these in a row here, talking about this vocal style, attitude, and the themes. So you listen to this. This is Oscar Brown from 1961. So this is 100-year, just about the 100-year anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. And what this is actually a slave auction. This is Oscar Brown doing his impression of a slave auction. So it's really like a very interesting, I think it's a really good way to criticize. So he basically just does a really awesome impression, and I hope that this leaves quite an impression on you. It always has left quite an impression on me. This is one of these ones that is gruesome every time I hear it, but a great thing that we all should hear. So I'm going to play it. It's in its entirety. It's only a minute and a half. So here's Oscar Brown Jr., Bin 'Em In from 1961, and this is his impression of a slave auction.
Light him, Mr. Kokomo, now get on it, boys.
Bid 'em in, get 'em in. That sun is hot and plenty bright. Let's get on to business and get home tonight. Bid 'em in. Auctioning slaves is a real high art. Bring that young gal, Roy, she's good for a start. Bid 'em in, get 'em in. Now here's a real good buy on about 15. Her great-grandmammy was a Dahomey queen. Just look at her face, she sure ain't homely. Like Sheba in the Bible, she's black but comely. Bid 'em in. Gonna start at 3. Can I hear 3? Step up, gents, take a good look, see, 'cause I know you'll want her once you've seen her. She's young and ripe, make a darn good breeder. Bid 'em in. She's good in the field, she can sew and cook. Strip her down, Roy, let the gentleman look. She's full up front and ample behind. Examine her teeth if you got a mind. Bid 'em in, get 'em in. Here's a bid of 3 from a man who's thrifty. 325, can I hear 350? Your money ain't earning you much in the banks. Turn her around, Roy, let 'em look at her flanks. Bid 'em in. 350's bidding, I'm looking for 4. At $400, she's a bargain sure. 4 is the bid, 450. $500 now, look alive. Bid 'em in, get 'em in. Don't mind them tears, that's one of her tricks. 550's bidding, who'll say 6? She's healthy and strong and well equipped. Make a fine lady's maid when she's properly whipped. Bid 'em in. 650, don't be slow. 7 is the bid, gonna let her go. At 7 she's going, gone. Pull her down, Roy, bring the next one on. Bid 'em in, get 'em in, bid 'em in.
All right, so there's Oscar Brown, and I think it's obviously the content of the song pretty terrible, but this is also So I think that there's a distancing in black music, especially as we get into jazz and things like that in the 1960s, which is I'm kind of starting while I'm doing this leap, that a lot of probably people involved in hip hop wouldn't necessarily look back to the blues. Tons of people in jazz and soul and things like that. There's a lot of young black music fans who are distancing themselves from it, seeing it as like old-timey music, things that didn't speak to them. So there were a lot of other things that did speak to these young hip-hop guys. One of the people who was extremely important and really, I mean, I would argue comes back is Malcolm X, and I think that he comes back because a lot of people come of age, and by the time it's the early 1990s, a lot of people who are at that time then 20 or 18 to 25, 26 years old, they sort of bring Malcolm X back, and when we think back about his legacy, it's actually really tough to think back about it without his resurgence in the 1990s, and that really is connected directly to a lot of hip-hop fans. And so here is a little sample speech of Malcolm X talking about black women and white men, but you listen to not only the content, and this is the sort of stuff that people look back to as heroes, content for their lyrics and whatnot, but also the vocal style. And again, this is this kind of continuum that you see this in speeches, and I could actually play sermons, church sermons that would really fulfill the same purpose, but I'm going to play a speech from Malcolm X. So here is Malcolm X talking about black women and white men, and this is from 1962.
As it was mentioned in the last rally, the only provider many of our children know is the white welfare agent or the white social worker. And because of this, many of our children mistake the white welfare agent or the white social worker as their father. And sometimes they're right. You see all these little half-white babies running around in the community. They're not that way because you and I want them to be that way. The white man rapes and ravishes and takes advantage of our women. He'll take your little sister. Yes, he will. Your little baby sister is the potential bait for every white man in Harlem. Your little daughter, your mother, your wife. Ask them sometimes. Every time they walk past the white man, he hits on them. He thinks that they're animals that he can abuse at will. This is where you get all these little half-white babies running around the street. None of them know who their daddy is. And all of them think that the white man is their daddy, and I said, most of them are right. And if you and I, if we don't wake up and keep that white man away from our women, our race will really be destroyed. Keep that white man's claws off our women. Make him know that the best way, yes. I never would stand up to an audience as large as this and fail to warn you of the importance of protecting your own woman. You can't go in a white neighborhood and get a white woman. You can't get the white man's daughter in his neighborhood. You can't get his wife or his mother or his sister in his neighborhood. Then why should you let him walk around here in your neighborhood with your wife and your mother and your daughter and your sister? If you do it to him, he'll bust your head. And what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Remember that. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Do you understand what I'm saying? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Let him know that the price he'll have to pay when he pats your woman is either the loss of his hand or the loss of his arm or the loss of his head.
There is Malcolm X, always an extremely powerful speaker, and so now we've kind of went through some of the vocal style and some of the content, and now jumping ahead, I'm going to jump ahead to Otis Redding because I think that he's a good person to represent this kind of crossover, and I'm not going to have enough time, obviously, to play all sorts of different kinds of rhythm and blues and soul, but I guess you're going to have to trust me that there's this sort of slow incorporation of boogie-woogie, rock and roll, different elements that create a kind of a soul sound. Otis Redding is one version of that. There's several other people that I could play, but I really think that this song, again, it makes sense. Here's a back and forth You listen to the content. A lot of these things are extremely. This is a song from 1967. Must have been the year that Otis Redding died. Very much things that end up showing up in hip hop a little bit later. So listen to the content and even the delivery and the style of this, and you can kind of hear this vocalization so much different than the blues stuff we're playing earlier, and it's over the kind of music that's going to sound a lot more familiar to people who are accustomed to early hip-hop. So here's Otis Redding, Tramp, 1967.
Tramp.
What you call me?
Tramp.
You did.
You don't wear continental clothes or Stetson hats.
But I tell you one doggone thing. It makes me feel good to know one thing. I know I'm alive.
That opinion.
That's all right, Mama was.
So,
Papa too. And I'm the only child loving all I know
you know what, Otis?
What?
You're country.
It's all right.
You straight from the Georgia woods.
That's good.
You know what? You wear overalls, them big old broke iron shoes, and you need a haircut, Tramp.
Woman, you too. Ooh, I love her. Grandmama. Papa too.
Make you
Oh, that's all right. But I'm the only son of a gun on this side of the sun.
right, that's what you are.
Everything red cat.
Right, and I'm Tramp. You know what, Otis? I don't care what you say. You're still a tramp. That's right. You haven't even got a fat bankroll in your pocket. You probably haven't even got 25 cents.
I got 6 Cadillacs, 5 Lincoln, 4 Ford, 6 Mercury, 3 T-Birds, Mustang. Ooh, I'm a lover.
Prove it by me.
My mama was. My papa too.
But
I'm gonna tell you one thing.
tell me.
I know the sound of a gun, yeah. Inside of the sun.
You're a tramp, Otis.
Nah,
I don't care what you say. You're still a tramp.
call me that.
Look here. You ain't even got no money.
I got everything.
You can't buy me all those meats and stables and all that stuff I want.
I can buy you meat, rats, frogs, squirrels, rabbits, anything you want.
Look, you can go out in the Georgia woods and catch them, baby.
All right, so there, and really the kind of the point of that is you get this back and forth, which I think is a style that you see as it's not coincidental that a lot of these hip hop guys come out in crews, right? And really sort of essential to the beginning of hip hop is the idea of the crew, and that actually a little bit connects to what we're talking about in our gang week in class, right? Is that there's sort of strength in numbers, and for a variety of reasons that would actually be important too, but this idea of like this back and forth, which has always been important. Again, I think this is like an essential element of black music is the back and forth, and like sort of the idea of crowd participation. And so it's, again, I think that this is very much on a kind of continuum that really sort of, I mean, and it's getting more and more obvious, I think, as we go forward, how this leads towards hip hop. And so now I'm going to play another song, which I love this group, The Last Poets, very, very, again, sort of like Oscar Brown Jr. too, and these guys who kind of make up the source material for a lot of hip-hop guys later. There's the musical source material, but there's also the content and the attitude, and that's a different kind of source material. And here, you know, The Last Poets, a lot of people just call the style jazzoetry as a genre. It's basically, you know, bongo rhythms, jazz rhythms, or whatever, with these kind of very socially conscious, very pointed kind of poems and poetry over the top of them. Best example, I would think, is The Last Poets, and I'm going to play a great song, well, I guess you could call it a great piece of jazzoetry. The White Man's Got a God Complex, and this, again, is just kind of trying to establish this idea of the continuum the content. This is from 1971 here, so we're moving forward. When we get into the 70s, you really start to get the music. But before we get to that music necessarily, you got to think about the different elements that make this up, and really, think of so now we're in 1971. Say you're born in the year 1971. Well, then you're 20 years old in the year 1991. So just to sort of put in perspective where hip-hop's coming from. Or say you're 5 years old in 1971, you're 25 years old in 1991. So thinking about the people who probably a lot of you are familiar with hip-hop, or maybe even they're probably old school to a lot of you all, but thinking of where they came from. So they're all coming out of this moment. So here's the last poets. White Man's Got a God Complex.
Sun up, down, on the corner, uptown. I turned around and hear the sound of voices talking about who's gonna die next. Cause the white man's got a God complex. Silent niggas scream for help. Hey, help me, help me. Nigga, make your own help. Shit, you need it. I turn around and hear the sound of jukeboxes playing in bars. Pimps popped outside in big pretty Cadillac cars. Cleaning in a broke dick dog. Sitting in a big fine hog. Dressed very fine in a mohair silk vine. But Jim Dale died next. Cause the white man's got a God complex. Hey brother, what's your sport, my man? I got just the thing for you. Only cost 10 and 2. What you gonna do, baby? I got black ones, brown ones, red ones, yellow ones. I even got a white one if you wanna buy some. Yeah, that's right. 258. Play it straight. I got it all worked out. Know what I'm talking about. Been reading my dream book. Ain't no way in the world the kid gonna get took. Nigga, what you mean I didn't hit? Nigga, you full of shit. Lick dies. Now 7. Come on, be nice and hit 11. Well, what do you know? It's Little Joe. Hey, my man got $20. Say Little Joe don't blow. Ha, baby needs a pair of shoes. Ha, Papa's got the funky blues. Ha, Mama plays the crossword in the news. Snake eyes. Sorry, nigga, you lose. The line forms to the real lady, and I don't care if you never cash your welfare checks. Cause the white man's got a God complex. But I got 10 babies, I ain't got no man. I ain't got no choice but to hold out my hand and feed my young ones the best way I can. Hey, man, what you mean no doubles on blackjack? Pump, you better change that rule, cause I ain't no fool. You better be cool, Jim, or you'll die next. Cause the white man's got a God complex.
All right, so there's 1971, The Last Poets, great group. Recommend you all check them out. And that really, essentially is sort of hip-hop at that time. What it is talking about it's giving you a sort of ghetto perspective from the ghetto perspective on some level. I think that this is like a lot of other early hip-hop, that it's more critical of the structures and the systems rather than trying to celebrate or cash in on the problems going on in the black neighborhood at the time. I think this is 1971, really coming out of years of intense violence and you could call it riots, I'd call it rebellion, struggles in urban areas. At this point, there is disillusion. There's still some hope, and a lot of stuff later on. You kind of sort of lose that hope. But these things are really, really essential and very obvious, right? The delivery, how that can influence hip hop, and there, of course, the group has been sampled by many, many, many artists, and then other artists are sampling the artists who sampled them without even knowing, possibly. And now I'm going to get into. So there's a lot of what I think is the sort of the fundamental sources of the style, the content. It puts all of this stuff in a continuum that stretches way back to, you could even say, post-slave times, going up through the blues. And now we're going to get into stuff that is much more musically attuned with what we think of when we think of hip-hop. And a lot of this has to do with the beat break. And what happened is sort of in the 80s, we're going to talk about this in class, a lot of people start to just take the breaks, the beat break, right? So you've got this, you'd call it the bridge, right? The bridge of these hip-hop songs, basically a drum solo or some kind of percussive type solo, and people take that and then make that be the beat of the hip-hop. So we're going to get into a few different versions of those kind of songs, and so I'm just going to play some stuff. There's a lot from, 1971, really just thinking I'm taking a few from 1971. There's nothing in particularly special about that year, but you're really looking from late 1960s to early 1970s, and then you start to get the combination of some of those old lyrical things over this new kind of music. So I'm going to play Funky Nassau Part 2. I'm going to start with this song, and we're going to go through a couple of similar ones here, some maybe more important than others. But 71, Funky Nassau, take a listen and you can hear what I'm talking about, this beat break. And I love there's a few things about this. One is it speaks to the Caribbean influence, and this is something that I'm going to get to in the next show, but a lot of hip-hop comes out of New York City. A lot of black folks in New York have a Caribbean connection. A lot of people coming from the Caribbean, so Nassau, Bahamas, Funky Nassau. And part of this in that band, by the way, is the beginning of the end, 1971. And just really, I think that they're doing something there with that instrumental. It has a lot of sort of a jazz feel, you could say, to it, right? But it's just like this idea of like one repetitive little chorus. So they're really saying that the song is kind of about the music, which is like jazz, but it's definitely close to funk, but it's also incorporating these sort of world elements. So a lot of different things are going on there. I'm going to play another band that I think is really essential because they end up getting sampled by almost everybody. So here is the song from Funkadelic, from the fantastic classic album Maggot Brain. Can You Get to That? Another song from 1971. And you sort of check this out and how close this is to really getting pretty close to what you'd call sort of modern hip-hop, even though it's 1971 and soul. So here's Can You Get to That? Funkadelic from Maggot Brain, 1971.
I wanna know if you can get the love. Can credit, and your loving days are done. Church shoes time with love and kisses later, come back, sign insufficient funds. Can you get I wanna know if you can get to that. Can you get I wanna know if you can get to that. Can you get I wanna know if you can get to that. I wanna know if you can get.
All right, again, you've got sort of the same thing there, right, as kind of more about the chorus than the verse. And this is a band, Funkadelic, Parliament Funkadelic. I mean, what you could call the originators of funk, and it's about that bass line, and when that sort of where this heavy bass line comes in. So you got this mixture. You hear this in Funky Nassau is about like the bongos and the drums. Then you get this heavy bass line coming in, right? And so you can see these elements coming together. And this is what hip hop DJs are going to do, is come and sample these things. So they're going to maybe take a bass line here, a drum beat there, and put these things together. And really the way that you can kind of think about this is, especially for anybody who is an MC out there or who enjoys listening to hip hop, just imagine rapping over these songs, right? How perfect that beat is if you minus out the vocals, how easy it would be to sort of do your own raps over them. I'm going to play another song here, Superfly. So this is getting back, this is kind of a combination of the attitude, the style, a little bit of the vocal delivery, but also something, a character, right? Superfly, this is based on a movie, and Superfly, the character, he's, what is he? He's the pimp, drug dealer, badass, beats up all the white cops at the end of the movie, right? And you see these sort of blaxploitation figures become heroes, and there's some people who really do. Public Enemy for a while does really intelligent sampling of this kind of stuff and reincorporates and reinterprets it. But here's Curtis Mayfield, another person, and I would say that Parliament, Funkadelic, and Curtis Mayfield, a couple other people are really, really essential because they become the source, the sample source. So it's all these DJs who don't have, and right, and this makes sense, you live in the middle of the hood, you might live in a tiny cramped apartment, you're not going to have a band there, right? You can put on headphones, mix these things, get a mixing board, right? A couple of people can get together, get a mixing board, everyone can bring their records. You've got all these old records. What do you have laying around your parents' house, right? All these old soul records that your parents might have, right? And you start mixing and matching these things, right? And so here's another one of those sources, Superfly, Curtis Mayfield. One of these kind of characters. That's from 1972, by the way, and it's from the movie soundtrack, a legendary music soundtrack by Curtis Mayfield. He has another song on there, I'm Your Pusher, which is not only sampled, but Curtis Mayfield actually steps in and does some production work and actually raps with Ice-T on his version of I'm Your Pusher, Man. Instead of pushing drugs, of course, Ice-T is famously pushing hip-hop instead of drugs. But just to sort of show you that very direct link, and Curtis Mayfield is important for a lot of reasons in that regard. Not only is it creating this kind of character that a lot of people end up identifying with, but also providing these kind of beats. And again, you listen to this and think of hip-hop hip hop, rapping, things like that, going over the top of these kind of beats. So I'm going to play one more song that is just like that, and then I'm going to give you another little vocal source. So here is the song is Apache from Michael Viner, and now we're going to move up a little bit. So the last one, Superfly, is 72. We're going to move to 73. I'm going to try and get as close to 1980 before we leave. We're running low on time, but here's Apache, Michael Viner. Percussion break. Imagine a kid with a record player who wanted to do some MCing, finding a record like that with that long break there, right? To basically to rap over. And another thing about Michael Viner is he's one of the first samplers, and he actually sort of gets into some legal trouble sometimes later, but the guy Michael Viner, he's a film producer, and so they take the Apache, which is the film theme, and put it into this environment, and he has got this bongo band formed. But it's about that drum break there. I'm going to play one more example of the drum break, and then I'm going to say my goodbyes here. So here's another song, and this is from Herman Kelly, and it's Dance to the Drummer's Beat. And again, this is from 1978, taking kind of a jump there, but you can sort of hear this progression, right, that there are these attitude things that are there, right, the sources for people to use, and then there's also this kind of music going on at the same time, so it's this mixture of all sorts of elements, but they're coming together. And then next time I'm going to talk about sort of how they come together in a particular environment, and I'm going to say in New York especially. But here is Dance to the Drummer's Beat, and this is extremely close to hip-hop. So the next two songs are, I'm going to play this one really quickly, and then I'll say my goodbyes. And here's the break beat. Not unlike the song Apache, almost the point of the song is the breakbeat, and this becomes really sort of, I'm going to tie this all together next week when I try to bring us sort of up a couple of years, but this is really, that's 1978. You're talking the next year are some of the first hip-hop, or that year, and I guess depending on how you want to sort of call them, you'd even say a couple of years before, the first real sort of genuine hip-hop rap type tracks. And I'm going to play Chuck Brown, a guy who's, sort of the inventor of go-go music, which is kind of this version of funk, soul, disco, really lends itself really well to hip-hop. Again, though, the point is, you hear the beauty about these break beats, too, is that they're focused on this kind of drumming, and this goes back to jazz, and that jazz goes back to sort of an African tradition, right? So it's creating this, even though there's people who would totally kick out the blues, would say that that doesn't influence them at all, they are influenced by it, and it's sort of clear on some levels that they are influenced by that, even if they don't want to pay homage to them. And so hopefully the thing that I've shown you is that there is this long list. If you want to find the roots, you have to go way, way, way back to find some of the vocal stylings, to find some of the content, some of the attitude, and all these things are going to turn into hip-hop. And I'm going to hopefully show us next time the transformation from these kind of musical things and these content things into what is actually hip-hop. And that's a sort of slow transition in itself, and that's another decade, and that'll be next time. Again, I am entirely responsible for the content of this program. River West Radio is not liable for any legal issues. I encourage you on Mondays now at 9 o'clock to check out the F Word from your classmate, for those of you in my class listening to this, Molly Connell's show, and to tune in next week to hear more about hip-hop if you want to, and I'll kind of hopefully make sense out of all this. Tune in tomorrow night for Jacob Glicklick's show at 7, The Size of Thoughts. Tune in Wednesday night. I believe that's 7, maybe 6. The pictures are getting smaller. Adam McConaughey's show on films. There's many great ones. As always, come on down to River West Film and Video, what I think is the coolest store, not only in River West, but in Milwaukee. A great place to get your videos. If you want documentaries on hip-hop, come on down to River West Film and Video, right in the middle of Center Street here, and you will be able to find them if you want documentaries on any of the things that I talk about, or any of the things that I talk about in class. Please come on down. Great, great, great store. I'm going to leave you with a little bit of Chuck Brown, like I said, go-go, combination of disco, funk, and soul. Really, really close to hip-hop. I'm going to play a little bit of this out before I say goodbye. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening in the archives, and hopefully you will tune in the future. Have a good night.